So I've changed my code to use the extension functions, and now I'm getting the same result as before. It's much more efficient, um, much more intuitive in a way for developers to write code this way. So that is really a cool way of doing it. So let's see. Let's look at a couple different ways we can display um, using HTML helpers. So if we go to the view here, at HTML, anything that starts with an at HTML is a HTML helper class, right? So this you have, we have like so many different ways to do HTML helper class. So like we have box, radio button, label, checkbox. Of course, we saw the drop down list. So these are like some types of HTML helpers that are available. Before we go into it, the question is, why can't we directly write HTML? Why do we need this helper function, right? So the helper function mainly helps us to do model binding. And when we have like a strongly typed HTML helpers, which we'll see a little later, or even here, we are directly tying it to that object that's in the database, right? So that binding happens. And also like it takes away like a lot of complexity with having to like worry about syntax and all that. So it's just like a simple function and then we are done type of thing. Okay, so we have the label class, we have drop down, and then we have text box and all these guys. So let's quickly see what is this text box. What does it have? Just give a name for the text box. Let's call it so if you see that there are overloaded methods, so value, object value means like if you want the text box to be pre-populated with radio button. So radio button, if you think about it, there's a name for the radio, radio button always comes in at least two, right? If not three. Blue. This will be radio and green. Create a div for each one of them. So these are just not tied to any data right now, right? We are just making up stuff. But I just want to like show you how the syntax goes. Again, you don't have to like know about how to actually do a label and all that. It's just all the translation to HTML happens internally. So let's call this as label. Yeah, HTML attributes. This one is asking for, so HTML attribute is where you can say what kind of class it's associated with, stuff like that. So we'll just call it label. Checkbox normally is associated with Boolean value, so this could be a checkbox. And then we set it to true or false, right? So let's say true. So these are um, just a bunch of controls that we are creating. These are not tied to any data element, right? Because these don't exist. There is no model entry that can be associated with these guys. So you have to remember that. So all we are trying to do is understand what the syntax is and how to create it. And we can actually look at the source code to see how it gets generated. Build and okay. This is really an ugly page, but I think you get the idea. So we wanted a text box that said hello, we got it. We wanted radio buttons, they are here. We wanted a label that said label, that's just a label. And then we wanted a checkbox that already had a selection. So we got all of them, right? And these are not associated with anything. So I said Control Shift I, and that brings about our HTML. So if you look at the HTML, so you can just click. If you click on this arrow here and then take it, that'll hover over where that is. So input, right? So that is the HTML equivalent. The text box name and ID are set to the name we gave as text box 1. The value, this is the type that says it's a text box. The value is hello. Okay. Again, let's look at this guy now. So click on this guy, hover. So radio button. These three are tied together because they all have the same name. If you have different names, they won't belong to the same radio button. That's how HTML is, right? So here, if you see that it has three values, and then we gave it as red, blue, and green, and they are all here. So, and then the input type is set to radio. So that is how the function that we use, the HTML helper, is translating it to HTML. Here, label, you can see here, label for, and then the fourth one is our checkbox there. So input checked, value is true. So just that's very straightforward, right? So let's go back, and if you look here, this is our select the drop downs that we created. So you can see all the values are going to be the ID of the album, and then the text is going to be the title. So you can see that all here. Okay, so we can close this. This is just for us to test things out. Let us say that I really want a radio button. I really want a text box, and I want it to be tied to my model object. So what would I do then? So at that time, what you do is you actually use the name correctly. Right now we don't have a name, right? We can actually use the name. So for example, I can go to my model albums. So let me go and add a new property. This is going to be my country of origin, and I want this to be displayed as a radio box. And I want this